You're right, yes. Welcome, everyone. This is the August 7th, Town of Scarborough. This is a workshop meeting. It's also a hybrid special meeting. We will be going into an executive session approximately 5:30 tonight, so we've about a half hour. We have a call to order and a pledge of allegiance I see here, so you all join me.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh. Hello, Counselor Katarina. How are you?
Well, I was trying to get on.
You made it.
You missed her for the pledge.
Yes, I
Yeah,
did.
missed the pledge, but we're about to do roll. So, Tony.
Snyder?
Here.
Counselor Fishing?
Here.
Counselor Shu?
Here.
Counselor Katarina?
I can't hear her, but I think she
Okay,
has said my
Katarina.
name. I'm here.
Counselor Hamel?
Here.
And Counselor Anderson?
Here.
Chairman McGee?
Here.
All
Thank you very
present.
much. Our first item is a council goals update for anyone that's been following along, or maybe those that haven't. Every year, the new council convenes, and we did this early in, I want to say January. We had a council workshop, went a little over 4 hours, if I recall, maybe even longer. And basically, we set up what it is we'd like to accomplish during the course of the year. We have about 5 meetings left as this current council sits as comprised, and wanted to do a quick check-in on where we are with our goals. Liam, if you have the ability to put it up on the screen so anyone at home can follow along. I think we've shown some really good progress here. So there's some stated goals that we've accomplished. We can put a nice check mark next to them, and that was maintain a net budget increase of less than 5%, explore expanding tax rebate programs, continue to support workforce and affordable housing options, limit the expansion of growth initiatives outside of existing permitted land and zoning uses, and raise awareness and effectively communicate to the town reevaluation process and impacts. I think all of those items we've tackled at some point during the year, and I think we can kindly say that we did what we set out to do. I'm going to do this in kind of sections. So for this section, is there anything anyone wanted to add or comment on for accomplished goals or clarification of maybe, for example, continue to support workforce and affordable housing options? We did have the iHome.
3I.
Sorry,
3I.
3I came through. We were supportive of their CEA request, so I felt like this was deserving of a check mark. So any questions, comments on things that we've accomplished?
Yeah, we put 2 check marks next to net budget increase, because I think we got it down to 1.47%.
2 checks.
Two checks. Yes, that's why it's at the top of the list. So next, what I've done here is stated goals that we have are in progress somewhere and are on track for completion. I've put a counselor's name as the chair of the committee that they sit on to hopefully give just a tiny bit of background about where it is in the process and where we can see it show up next. So the first one here is update financial modeling, a cost to serve analysis, and Downs TIF CEA modeling. Counselor Anderson?
Yep. So we actually, at the beginning of the council, worked through the first 2 portions of that with the modeling and the cost to serve that SEDCO put together, and we voted as a committee to approve. What we didn't get to when budget took over was revisiting the application of that to the Downs TIF CA modeling. So we're actually doing that tomorrow at our next meeting. And so with that complete, we will have kind of a full package that we'll want to bring probably to the council in the future as a workshop potentially to kind of give an update on what that modeling is so everybody understands it and how it applies to the Downs and the TIF. It would be great if we can somehow package that and partner that with an update from the Downs as well, because this is really going to be, the town kind of showing how we see the long-term value of that partnership come to life, and then kind of getting an update from them potentially in terms of what's actually happening at the project right now and making sure that our assumptions and that model are correct. So I would say once we once the finance committee pressure tests the model tomorrow with the Downs, I think we could consider this goal essentially met. anything the finance committee members want to add since you've been part of the work with Karen Martin, looking at that modeling? No? All right, the next one was update impact fees, which is also assigned to me. And so I think for this council, I think we've checked the box in terms of updating rec and some of the transportation fees. I think what's still on the docket based on the bigger plan that Tom outlined was additional transportation impact fees to come after the transportation study. Potentially some public works impact fees, and then a school impact fee. So I think with the school still somewhat in flux, I think we have to defer that until we have a better sense of what the total cost is going to be for the school solution. So I see this probably being more something that the next council might want to pick up. Or maybe this is something where Tom can provide a revised plan of, given we've completed this first phase, what's phase 2 look like and where do we want to go from there?
I would add, I envision bringing potentially, at least for discussion purposes, an open space fee. One does not exist, but we have a plan that's underway. I expect that will be a wonderful blueprint that we can work from.
And then the next goal is establish a multi-year capital facilities prioritization list for investment needs of 5 million over the next 20 years. So we did discuss that at our last finance committee meeting, and I took the lead to work with staff to kind of outline a plan of action of how we would tackle this. We'll likely pick that back up at our September finance committee meeting, and probably behind the scenes, I'll align with Tom a little bit on what that looks like. I don't know if we will complete this goal by this council. I see us definitely making progress, but I think the long tail on this one is going to be the public engagement to get feedback on whatever it is we create and make sure we don't skimp on that. So I could see us going into, at least the plan I drafted, going into January before we would have something for the council to start to vote on. And again, that was just my recommendation to staff, and I'll work with them to see if there's a way to crunch that in. That this one to me, I think, is super important. And your question of like, if I had to pick my top 3 goals or the top 3 things I would want to see us get done or move faster, I think that one would be one of them.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Councilor Shoup, you have the next 2 items on this list.
Sure. So we have continued to support the Ad Hoc Community Center Committee and their planning efforts. I think as everyone in the council and some of the public's aware, we actually already have that whole presentation ready to go, and we have a workshop scheduled for August 21st. That's for our regularly scheduled town council next meeting. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what that committee came up with. I mean, this is in direct response to the survey that we did, saying that this is what the community wants to see. So I'm excited to see what they came up with. And the next goal was to advance the land bond for the 2024 ballot to replenish open space and conservation funds. I think as we all just saw, we had the 6 million bond proposal that was just passed on the first read at our last meeting. Because this is one of the council goals and this is something that is on the ballot, one of the questions and one of the things that I had talked to Tom about was actually adding language to the ballot that would include along the lines of this is a council goal, and what was the language, Tom?
It was a section that for explanation and recommendation, if you wish to take one.
Okay.
Take that position as well.
So one of the things I was going to be proposing for discussion was if we should add language to the actual ballot saying that this is a recommendation. So that's where we're at with that, but it's on our agenda for our next meetings for second reading and then public hearings. That's the next 2.
All right, thank you. Councilor Hamel?
Just
Oh,
on
sorry,
that
go ahead,
point,
yeah.
would it be helpful if I shared the language that I prepared just for review and comment? We've got some time to take input. Share that out with all of you after this meeting.
Okay.
Councilor Hamel, you have the next one.
Thank you. We had some changes to chapter 302A, and I think thanks to the work of the committee and to Jody helping us pull these together, they'll be ready for us to bring to the council on our next regular meeting. So we had a much longer list of things, but we boiled it down to these 3. Basically, one is limiting the terms of committee members to the same term limits that councilors' terms are, 3 3-year terms. So there was that one. There was also one having to do with making sure that we had a representative from the town council and from the planning board to serve on the Conservation Commission. This is work that was done by Karen and others. And then finally, to make sure that we are adopting commitment that all committee meetings will be recorded. So I think there's mainly two outliers, primarily Shellfish and Conservation Commission. But hopefully, thank you. So those are the small contributions from rules and policies in a group that hasn't really met in a year or two. So we plowed through it. Thank you.
Thank you. Phase out cannabis cultivation with negative impacts to residential areas. So as we all know, we've spent a lot of time talking about cannabis over the last year or longer. And I think on our agenda, we are into a second read on a possible 1,000-foot buffer. I think that would, in my mind, start to address that goal for here council. We'll see how it goes at second read. So can't ever promise anything as we raise our hands and vote, but it is out there and we did pursue that goal. So next, Karen, you're back up on deck.
Sure. So support a climate action plan for Scarborough utilizing data from the vulnerability assessment. So a climate action plan is actually made up of 4 components. So we have the vulnerability study, the open space plan, a greenhouse gas emission inventory, and then a greenhouse gas emission reduction strategy. So in regards to the vulnerability assessment, that's currently happening now. And you guys are having a couple workshops coming up on Monday is one of them. And then you have neighborhood ones in Higgins and Pine Point coming up. That's going to be completely wrapped up in December of 2025 is my understanding. So with that being complete next summer, we'll have the open space plan completed this spring. And then I think the greenhouse inventory and those are other things they've already done. That will all come together. So that's a goal I think that will carry on and we'll have a completion for next year.
Great. Councilor Anderson, we're back at you.
Yeah, this one, the next one, I think, for this, sorry, CA policy, I was looking at the next one. So that one is actually as well on our agenda tomorrow, where staff has put together recommendations that streamlines some of the policy, but also adds in a component for affordable housing CEAs. So really what prompted this goal was the fact that we have a policy, but it really only applied to economic development projects. And so staff has worked to kind of clean things up and then bring forward a recommendation for affordable housing. That one has not, the affordable housing component hasn't made it to the Housing Alliance yet. So that's going to get reviewed by them after our finance committee meeting, where we'll provide staff input as well. And I suspect at some point, maybe in September, we'll vote it forward to council for action for review. So I think we should be able to get the final reviews of that approved by the council before this council expires. The next one is around raising awareness around a multi-year investment plan to improve town infrastructure, streets, sidewalks, and transportation initiatives. So I don't think we've made a very concerted effort on this one, but I do think staff, through the communications that they do and the plans that I've seen, have been taking these as key things that they're communicating. I think I would maybe defer to the communications chair, maybe if you want to provide an update on this one too, but I do feel like through the budget process, especially, we focused on a lot of these things. And so the communications around the budget, I think, and the choices we made around budget really did support this particular goal.
I'll also just add to that. You've been seeing a frequency of articles, whether it's in the e-newsletter or through the forecast, not forecast, is it forecaster?
Leader?
Leader, thank you. The leader, pretty frequently about what's happening with transportation projects around town. So I think you can see that the effort's there, whether it came together as a, maybe a package deal that we were trying to sell, maybe not so much, but we are actually increasing those efforts to communicate out those projects to the community. So well done there, to staff especially, because I think the brunt of that lift is definitely on staff. So
anything? No. The next one is the townwide transportation study. So I believe staff is bringing the consultant's recommendation to the transportation committee this month, and this should be their final review before that study comes forward to council. One thing that I learned in the process, and just for awareness, the piece around the Payne Road impact fees and all that work that went in to justify the Payne Road impact fee, that was really kind of step one around this transportation study. And so to me, that was kind of the town making a deliberate choice to say, rather than focusing on the big study, this is a big project that's a pain point that we need to kind of prioritize. So that was where a lot of the effort initially has gone. but we do have a broader study coming forward that we've seen on the Transportation Committee in pieces. And now we're gonna see the whole thing as a collective whole. So I think this one's making progress, and I think there's an intent to hopefully have the council be presented it at some point before this council expires.
Thank you. Counselor Katarina, did you have anything?
Yeah, I have a question for John or anybody. The Transportation Committee, out of curiosity, have they been involved at all in this Gorham connector issue? I haven't seen or read or heard or whatever, and I would like to propose that if not, they should get involved in that because it is
Yeah.
part of the whole it's regional. I mean, we're talking about regional issues, and Scarborough is contributing quite a bit to the congestion that's going west of the town. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
So they did, it was similar to like when the council was first presented. Maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. We did have the MTA present to the Transportation Committee. We've had residents come and talk to the Transportation Committee about it. I think there's interest by the committee to take a position. I think the reason they haven't is because we haven't really asked or taken a position. So if that's something we want to do, you know, we can definitely think about that committee. I know there's a desire to get the Conservation Commission also to offer an opinion. So maybe that's something we can talk more about when we get to the Gorham Connector conversation.
Yeah, I mean, and I just, rather than putting it out there that to take a position, it's like to get educated also as a committee.
I know we're gonna talk about this later, Mr. Chair, if I may, but part of the process, part of the problem I see with some of with our goals, we're kind of ticking them off one by one, but we're not really putting them in the context of, you know, how effective are they as measures and what process are we following? Are they, you know, are they effective measures like, hey, they're attribute measures, you know, the lights are on or off? Yeah, we got a 30 by 30. Okay. But is it variable? Is it like a rheostat where you can turn the lights, you know, up or down and decide, you know, how much light there is in the room? I think with a lot of these things, we don't really have that sophistication. We're on the board, you know, we're happy with that, but how effective is it? And how are we measuring our effectiveness? If we were to ask the public how they felt about it, I'm sure that, you know, our grades that we've been giving these goals, you know, would not look the same based upon what they're telling us. So this is something just in general that I'm looking at and hearing as we're talking through this. And one final point I'll make about the process, quote unquote process, it's not really clear what process there is, you know, for some of these quasi public-private agencies like the Maine Turnpike Authority and others, you know, or even the town for that matter. We don't really haven't defined a process for how we are going to go through this. We're waiting for, you know, we had a sliding date for when we were actually going to have a meeting on this. And every time we talk about it, it keeps sliding. So I would just say we need to be step back a little bit and talk about how these things fit into the process and when you know, what is the process? What's the timing? What are the steps and how are we going to decide? So I know that's part of our exercise, but I think we need to apply that regimen to big issues like the Gorham Connector and others.
I think, Don, you know, I'll definitely say I agree with your sentiment that some of these are very, very much a variable type of goal. And that one in particular, when you talk about identifying priorities that relate to congestion and traffic relief around the community, probably could have been listed right under the stated goals that require ongoing council efforts. Because none of those, there's no silver bullet for traffic and congestion. What you do know is that it's not just this council that needs to be vigilant and try to, you know, take the proper steps forward. It's the next one behind us. Because the only way you'll never tackle it in a year. Especially knowing that transportation studies, the money that comes with it, that's a multi-year process.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate though where you're coming from. And yes, I feel confident saying that we've taken some really good steps here as this council is seated. But again, as you know, people carry on to their next terms, need to be vigilant. And you know, I would encourage future councils to maintain those types of goals just to make sure we are making progress But thank you, Don, for that. Bring that to light. Next on here is partner with school department, BOE and community to develop a plan for school facility needs and help facilitate it through a public process. Well, I guess I would gladly report that we did accomplish this to some extent, and it's still ongoing. Phase one included, and it was a joint effort with the BOE. We pulled together at the start 70+ community members. At the end, we still had 50+ community members help us formulate through phase one. Happy to report that phase two, we have got a draft document that we've been working on with the school board. We expect that to surface at the next meeting for first and a second read. So we want to have a little bit more public involvement there. So this is working. We are in this process, and it's like, I think we coded that correctly. It's still part of the process, but I'm happy how much progress we've made on this, because it's not easy getting that many people in the room pointed all in the same direction. So. Next, we have stated goals that require ongoing efforts, council actions that have led to continued support. And as mentioned, that we probably could have easily removed that traffic and townwide transportation study into that category. But next, we have Councilor Anderson on maintaining an optimal credit bond rating.
Yep, so I see this as two things. Thing number one is we will be going out to the bond market in the next month or so. And I'm assuming, Tom, we're talking to the credit rating agencies coming up. So that'll be kind of our official, are we maintaining our bond rating, which again, I don't think there's any major significant risk of anything that's changed this year that they will look at. The other piece is a policy perspective, where I know specifically for Councilor Cushing at our last meeting, we talked a lot about what does this actually mean, and do we need to update the policy to be a little bit more clear? So I anticipate as finance works through other policy language adjustments that we want to bring to council, this will be one topic that will likely come forward, where hopefully we will have better language in the policy potentially on how we define what an optimal credit bond rating is. And so that way we just have that for clarity, in addition to other financial things. So I know this is one area that's very, Councilor Cushing's very passionate that we try and explore. So anything you want to add there, Councilor Cushing? Okay.
I would just say, I think you went so far as a committee to actually articulate investment grade bond rating is what your standard was.
Yeah, that's what we are doing. Our current bond rating is investment grade. And what is it? It's A+, or what is it? now?
Depends on which agency.
That's a
Pick
Moody's or.
Yeah.
Yes, it's forgive me, A+1, I believe is.
A+1, yeah.
The one,
But it's investment grade A+1.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, we should have a discussion about that
mhm.
and the issue of optimizing, which I take as being sort of maximizing the benefit with the least amount of risk and pain.
Yeah.
And I think having some discussion about what are the elements that are involved in that conversation would be useful.
Councilor Hamilton.
I'd like to build on this a little bit, if I may. And I know we have debates about this back and forth. So it's one thing to have a great credit rating. It's another thing to have a conversation about how much debt should we carry? You know, if we're looking at debt to expenditures of 1-to-1, maybe that's not so good. Okay. Those kinds of questions we need to press ourselves to ask those questions and to have some dialogue about that. And also talk at the same time about, what is our policy on unassigned fund balance and how we used it. We were quite comfortable taking money out of an unassigned fund balance and saying that it's not where it should be. We don't have two months of operating income, but we think we're good with that. So I'd like us to expand that conversation and not just be self-satisfied that we got a investment quality bond rating and that our bond salesman telling us, you're looking good again. I think that we need to be a little bit more self-critical with ourselves on that.
So that was at least the conversation that we had about the unassigned fund balance portion that leads to the bond rating. And I think it was Councilor Cushing who pushed and said, but there's other metrics, including debt per capita that are also really critical. So I think this conversation is really kind of looking at all those metrics, saying, where do we want to be? Where can we make progress? Where do we have the most control? What does that mean to maximize results and minimize effort so that we can form some policy around some specific targets that can help us and other councils, because this isn't going to be changing our bond rating isn't something that happens overnight. It's going to take months and, or sorry, years and decades potentially if we ever really wanted to go higher. And so anybody who's passionate about this, particularly you, Council Himmel, I invite you to come to the meeting and help us shape it. Like, I'm totally open to other counselors being part of the recommendation so that we can bring something to this council, or even if you just want to let the committee work and then bring it to council and have the conversation, then that's fine. But what you're describing is the intent of what we need to really kind of debate at the finance committee so that we can define what optimal is, and more importantly, how do we get there? The one piece that the committee is recommending in the fiscal policy around unassigned is that we add language that essentially says that we target to try and get to the 16.6%. And so trying to memorialize that that is a policy objective of the council that other councils should follow, and trying not to use fund balance in certain scenarios where we, again, if counselors really want to add specific things that prevent us from using it in certain situations, like we can talk about that type of language, because that's what would be embedded in the policy.
Thank you, Councilor Henderson. Councilor Shoup.
Sure. So the next goal was to continue to support efforts to increase our open space / conservation efforts in town, such as the 30 by 30 goal. So I think when we discussed some of the goals earlier, we already discussed the land bond, which is slated for $6 million to be on the ballot, and hopefully that will succeed. And then if we do have that $6 million, then what will play out nice is then we'll have the open space plan, which is the next phase, and that will come in the spring. So then the open space plan will help us identify land that we think is vulnerable and most in a priority. And so part of that plan is identifying what we've conserved to date, what we consider conserved, and things like that. And then one of the other efforts that I wanted to bring a mention to was the environmental standards ordinance that has been floating around, because that is a lot of effort that was coming out of the Conservation Commission. And big part of that ordinance is protecting around the resources. So we're proposing to increase some of the buffers around the resources, protect the marsh, and really make an effort here to not build up to the resource and further protect it for the future.
Thank you. Councilor Seiler.
So our next goal is improve council town communications to enhance understanding around council decisions. I will say, to speak to something that Councilor Hamel had said about, measurables and how we kind of are grading ourselves. One of the things that the communications committee has had some discussions around this year is kind of how do we measure success when it comes to communications, and how as a committee are we holding ourselves accountable to making sure that we're not just checking that box and saying message was sent, that we are following up and having a measurable way to say this is the number of website clicks that were driven by a council communication, for example. And so that is something that we're working on, making sure that any kind of communication goals, that we have a measurable way to kind of track our success. Another example is just something simple. We're going to have exit sheets at Councilor Corner Live tonight, so that we have some kind of feedback, what drove people to attend the Councilor Corner Live, and then, what their kind of overall assessment of the activity is in terms of whether or not they found it engaging for the council. For the goal specifically, I would say the council should probably have some conversation around reframing and focusing on that council decision aspect. And maybe as a committee, we can identify some priorities in terms of what we want to communicate. Past decisions, we're kind of focused right now on being proactive. And so we haven't, as a committee, spent a lot of time talking about this, making sure that people understood the decision-making process, but we can certainly, in the next few months of meetings, engage that conversation for sure.
Thank you, April. And then our next section here is stated goals that have not been achieved and we have not had any action taken to date. There are two. I'll take both of those. To provide easier and clearer information to the public surrounding major topics within the community via the implementation of an issue tracker sheet. The tracker sheet should contain information on the topic, hearing dates, and disposition for the public to easily follow issues of interest to them. This is solely on my shoulders. I offered to do this and I need to sit down and do it, and I owe it to the communications committee to get that to you soon. So that is on my list. Next is improve residential water quality standards, pursue a clean drinking water standard versus potable standard. This was kind of a pet project I had, that I know the water quality from wells in this town is pretty low. And a lot of the time, new construction builders, they'll put in the system, a well, they'll deem it potable, but it doesn't mean you should be drinking out of it. It doesn't mean kids that are, pouring out of the faucet and drinking that water, it doesn't mean it's entirely healthy to consume. So, was there an ability to require new construction to, either put in some sort of mitigation system to make sure that we have drinkable water coming out of the housing that's being built here in town? I'm going to categorize this under the actual the last question I have on this sheet here is, what do we want to prioritize? How much of a priority is that for this council? It might not be a big ask or a big pull, but I think it should be part of the discussion, whether or not we want to actually task staff to start to develop some language around that. But I'm open to that discussion. And then the last part here is stated goals that may require further discussion, clarification, and or revision. And I think this is the one that Council Katarina, I know, and Council Anderson as well have a great amount of interest, not that anyone else here doesn't, but both related to the Gorham Connector. And those goals were continue to support the Gorham Connector as a way to reduce traffic congestion in western and northern Scarborough and identify land use implication and impacts of the Gorham Connector. So we've done we've constantly said at this level that we wanted to see the MTA process play out, let them have their public meetings, let them, develop their plans, explain their plans. I'm still of a mindset that it's not inappropriate to do at this time. However, I also understand that this council, we just received another slew of emails into our inboxes regarding the Gorham Connector, and whether or not this council wants to do something more on this topic or less. I'll just leave it open for how we want to handle it as a council going forward. Because I know the last time we talked about this was January. So, Councilor Hamel.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair,
just step back.
I've had my hand up for a while.
Councilor Katarina.
Sorry, Mr. Hamel.
That's okay.
I'm being bossy, even though I'm not there.
I can't see you. You're in a tiny little square like Hollywood Square.
That's better than sitting next to you, right? So a couple things. First, the water quality thing. I'm glad you spoke more about that, because that's a hard one to wrap your hands around. And I guess, but you explained it further that you're looking, if I get it right, that you're thinking that as a municipality, we should have something that requires builders to do more than they do in other municipalities. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if that's the exact shape, but yes, I think it would be a higher standard.
Okay, all right. I'm just, and just one thing is, I'd be curious as to if anyone else does that. And then as far as the connector, as you folks know, you've heard me say this 18 million times. I've been working on this whole thing since 1988. I am directly impacted by, it's not just congestion, it's excessive volume of traffic on roads that weren't made for the traffic. That's now been going on for a while. I can see changing the goal that says, continue support of the Gorham Connector to something along the lines of, instead of saying we're going to continue to support it, because frankly, the MTA is stepping back. They've got some of their own whatever going on right now with Peter Mills retiring. And I know that they are looking to step back and recalibrate and re-examine what's what with that. I'll be the first one to tell you, I'm disappointed by their lack of adequate communication around everything, because anyway, but with that being said, I would like to see a statement to the effect of continue to work with the MTA and surrounding communities to develop solutions to the congestion and excessive volume of traffic in western North Scarborough. I mean, that way you're not even talking about the connector. Maybe that's one of the options. Maybe it isn't. But that as a council, we're willing to work with, MTA, DOT. Those would be your two major, state, um, entities, so to speak. But I'd like to see us, rather than just say, to heck with it, we're pulling support. Because I don't think we mean we're pulling support per se. I think we need to be working hard to figure out how we're gonna solve this issue, because it's just gonna get worse. Hasn't gotten better, and it's not gonna, and it's not going to get better without some definitive planning. And I think everybody involved needs to be involved. So that's just where I'm coming from. That's why I came to this meeting tonight.
Thank you, Council Katarina. Council Hamel?
This is a great question, and a great point, a couple of points that Jean Marie has made, using the Gorham connector as an example. I think the way she reframed it is exactly right. There's no question there's a need for some sort of solution to alleviate the traffic issues there, in that part of Gorham. I think there's very strong support for that. The solution that we had, I think, is quite clear. There was a lot of frustration about that and a concern that maybe that was not the right one. But there are, I think we have a lot of examples like that where we have a stated goal that's broad and laudable and hard for people to disagree with. But then if you look at our individual actions that we take, that line up against that, it doesn't fit. Let me use for an example, and I don't want to pick on anybody in particular, but we still have a property that releases stuff into the marsh, okay? And the statement that we gave there from the town standpoint was decidedly lukewarm. There are things like that where we need to take a harder position on and say, wait a minute, if we're gonna have a broad goal that we want to have, a clean environment and safe and healthy marshes, then we can't tolerate something like that. Or if we want to continue to be sustainable in terms of our development, we really need to take a hard look at infrastructure, which today one could argue is not keeping up. So I think we need to really hold ourselves to task and to make sure that the broad principle statements are fitting with the day-to-day, week-to-week decisions that we're making. And so I think that's true with many of these goals.
Councilor Anderson?
Yeah, so I would say as it relates to the Gorham connector and MTA, I think I would be supportive of us having a goal similar to how Councilor Katarina framed it. But I also think we have to be a little bit more specific and directive to MTA in terms of what we would like to see happen next. So when I take a step back and I think about what they've proposed, the feedback we received, and really, the really poor communication, I would say, that they've had to date, I really want to see a clear public engagement process, that they have dates that they stick to. I would like to see a third-party validation that they pay for, that we select the provider to look at the alternatives analysis that they did and consider other solutions that may not be an MTA-centric solution, but other solutions that we could consider to address the traffic congestion issue. I would like, if they do come forward back with a revised solution, that they demonstrate that that solution meets all the components of the MOA that we've agreed to. I still feel like there's questions about certain things that they said that they were going to do that we haven't seen yet. And I would like, as Councilor Katarina suggested, that we actually tap into our committees to get real positions when we do have a revised solution on what those committees think, most notably conservation, sustainability, long range, and transportation, who I think have the most purview into what this solution could be and how it's going to impact the area. So I personally am not supportive of the solution that they've proposed to date. I think there's a lot of work to be done. It's good to hear that they're kind of taking a step back and reassessing. And I think that's the opportune time for this council to kind of guide and direct what we expect them to do during that period. And so I would like to see us actually take some official action besides just having a goal, and maybe have a resolution that gives that specific direction to them as they go forward, if that's the will of the council. I also personally would be fine too if we just said, stop the work, we're good, we don't need this solution.
Councilor Anderson, are you willing to kind of put something that we could consider in writing?
I am.
And,
Counselor Shoup?
oops,
Sure. So, I mean, I feel like they've come out with a route. They've established a route. They want to pull permits for a route. And yes, they are reorganizing their organization, but this is the plan that they're coming forward with. So I'm of the opinion that at this point, like, yes, we're waiting for the public engagement process, but we have a route that we can currently evaluate. So if they want to reassess, I think we should be evaluating the current proposal now. I have asked the Conservation Commission for the last 2 months and they've sort of declined to evaluate the current route and the environmental impacts. They're a little hesitant. I want them to do it now. I think if we have our committees, the Conservation Commission, the Transportation Commission, the Sustainability Committee, identify and evaluate the current route, then we have real data to make our opinions on, real data to go back to the MTA and say, you know, it's not just the town council that feels this way. We had our committees evaluate this. The fact that South Portland Conservation Commission, who's barely touched by this, came out in opposition already, I feel like we should be like them. We're definitely a lot more impacted by than South Portland, but they felt comfortable coming out in opposition already. I'm obviously opposed to the current route. I'm opposed to the whole idea. I would like to see numbers when people are sitting in the Conservation Commission questioning the numbers being presented by the MTA. I think we should be questioning them ourselves. I think we have committees that are currently staffed with people who can answer these questions and dive into if this is affecting Red Book, if these emissions numbers are actually accurate, if this is actually if the Transportation Committee can actually say this is a solution. So I do not support this goal. I think we should reword it. I think we should be really digging into the current proposal. I don't see them changing it unless we actually come out in opposition now to it, not just sitting back waiting.
I do want to make note, not that I want to cut anyone off here, but we are a little bit over and we do need have an executive session we need to get into. If it would be okay, I'd like to recommend that the council do a couple things for me here. One, I still want to have the discussion about what do we want to do with the last 5 meetings we have left. So if you could each just take a minute and email April and I or the whole council, you know, 1 or 2 things that you think we really should prioritize over the next 5 meetings. That would be helpful so we can try to start pushing on the right buttons to get things moving. 2, I think Councilor Katarina's suggestion, I wrote down some language real quick as she was talking. I'd be happy to circulate this and see if we want to revise a goal as part of this effort. And I just wrote down, continue to work with the MTA and other transportation authorities to find a way to reduce traffic congestion in northern and western Scarborough. Plain and simple, we don't know. We think that this council should still help that process. Maybe this isn't the answer though. Councilor Cushing.
But I'm not going to go on and on. I just want to say that you all know we've got 40 emails. We filled up this room 2 or 3 times with citizens who have basically said, we're done with the Gorham Connector. We oppose the Gorham Connector. I think that if we do not withdraw our support for the Gorham Connector, we will be ignoring people like our dear friend Stannis, who has put in so much work on this process. You came in at the right time, sir. So the point is that I think that what Jean Marie is suggesting is perfect. We should work with the MTA and the state transportation authorities and so forth. We've got the rising tide going to cover Route 1. We've got traffic. We've got a whole bunch of things. But I think what the public is telling us and what I've heard many of you say is we're sort of done with this thing. And I appreciate the nuanced language and so forth, but the folks who are writing to us want to hear one clear, specific answer, which is we're done. And I hope we can get to that as soon as possible.
Mr. Chair.
Hold on, Councilor Katarina. I got Councilor Seiler's been having her hand up.
Okay.
I was literally just going to suggest that we don't debate the topic specific and that we just create a plan forward for a future conversation. Because I think that was kind of how we framed the goals update.
Sure.
That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Councilor Seiler. Councilor Katarina.
Yeah, and I agree with Counselor Seiler. That's what I was going to say. I have one request though, and I know I've talked to Counselor Anderson about this. The only reason I'm here tonight really is because my daughter's flight got delayed. She's not coming in till 9:15. But I'm not going to be able to make the meeting on the 21st. And I would ask, with all due respect, that we wait on any substantive discussions on, like I know John John, you've drafted something regarding a resolution or whatever. If I would respectfully request that we wait until I get back that first meeting in September.
Thank you, Councilor Katarina. All right. I don't think that's an unreasonable request, Counselor. So with that, though, I do want to wrap up the discussion, so Counselor Himmel? Yes.
Could you clarify, you said that you had stated that you wanted each of us to give you 5 things that we'd like to see in terms of accomplishing goals. Was that what you stated, or what was your ask on that?
What, we have 5 meetings left as a council, and so if you want to send me like 1 or 2 of these hot button issues that you think we can try to get pushed through the process, you know, or a little bit more focus on, I'd appreciate it. I think April would too, as we sit down with Tom and staff to work through really what we can do with this council, because, you know, quite frankly, we have 3 open seats coming up this November. So if we wanted something done, now's the time to really start pushing on it.
My only appeal here is to do a few things well, and let's just be modest about and realistic about what we can get done, you know.
Sure, absolutely. So with that, I appreciate everyone's efforts here. Clearly, for anyone watching at home, you can see that a lot has been going on behind the scenes, in committees, in public. So we appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the goals update. This time, I'll take a motion to adjourn for the purpose of an executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, subsection 405(6)D regarding labor negotiations between the town of Scarborough and the Scarborough Police Benevolent Association, the Scarborough Professional Dispatchers Unit of Scarborough Firefighters Association, IAFF number 3894, the Scarborough Professional Firefighter Association, IAFF Local 3894, and the Public Works Teamsters Local Union 340. Is there a motion?
So moved?
Is there-
Second.
I'm gonna have to do a roll call vote because Counselor Katarina is at home. All in favor, Counselor Seiler,
Yes.
Counselor Cushing,
Yes.
Counselor Shute,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor McGee. So that is unanimous. Thank you very much, and we will be in executive session.